think this was the biggest shock I had. I really felt like this was my calling and I was really drawn to it, even though it was something that was completely out of my comfort zone. First-hand experience seeing that children with emotional behavior disabilities definitely have a lot of stereotype and prejudice against them, and this really bothered me. I've worked in a lot of other fields in special education, but this is definitely the one that I have found to be the most rewarding for me. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Rachel from the Behavior Check-In. I'm a behavior teacher in Florida and I'm a coach, so I work with teachers in the classroom and parents. But in today's video, we are talking about why I chose to work in the field of behavior and what I think people need to know if they're thinking about working with this population of students. Before we jump into the video though, I really wanted to share something with you that got me super excited. Right now I'm on Thanksgiving break, so I'm thinking all about shopping and how I can buy some fabulous gifts for the people that I love and care about in my family. And I personally love jewelry. And if you're looking today at anything that I'm wearing, you can see that I have these absolutely gorgeous pieces of jewelry on today that I am in love with. I love feeling put together, even when I go to work, even when I'm dealing with challenging behaviors. It just makes me feel better. I feel more professional. I feel more confident and ready to slay the day. So I do like to look nice and put together. And this jewelry was sent to me by Ana Luisa. I have worked with Ana Luisa before. You can find that in my other video that I have up here. And I love, love, love their pieces. They are just so sturdy and hypoallergenic, which has been great for me. I have super sensitive skin and ears, and most earrings actually irritate my ears. For a long time, I didn't even wear earrings because I would get infections in my ears from the jewelry, allergic reactions. Never had an issue with Ana Luisa. I also love their pieces because they are so sturdy. I can wear them in the shower, I can wear them in the Florida humidity, and they just really hold up, which is a big thing to me. I actually have this ring that I'm wearing that I got from the first time they sent me any of their products, and I still love this ring. It's been about 2 years later and it's held up. I get compliments on it all the time. One of the things I really love about Ana Luisa is it's very affordable, which is so important on a teacher's budget. We don't have a lot of money, especially for gift giving or for gifting ourselves. So I love that their pieces start out at $39 and they just look incredibly elegant. I also love that they're carbon neutral and good for the environment. As I said, hyperallergenic. Even their packaging is carbon neutral, which I just think is amazing. They also have very unique designs, things you're not going to find on Amazon or at the mall, which I think really helps in having people give you compliments. My students give me compliments on my jewelry all the time. That's one of the reasons I like to wear jewelry. It gives us a conversation piece when we're wearing something that, we can have a discussion about. I will link below my link that you can personally use, and you can get any of the jewelry from Ana Luisa if you use my link for 30% off. But right now they're doing a huge sale between November 21st and 25th. You can get 35% off, so you can save even more. This is amazing. You're not going to want to miss this sale. It is November 21st through 25th, and if you go ahead and use my link below, you can get 35% off. This is great for any gifts that you would want to get for anybody you love, ones, for yourself, teachers, whoever you want to spoil with Ana Luisa jewelry. Love Ana Luisa, and I have been very happy with the jewelry that I have received from them, and I'm a longtime supporter of Ana Luisa, so I feel very confident making this recommendation to you. Make sure you check out my link below for more. So basically, why did I decide to go into behavior special education? Well, I kind of fell into it. As many of you know, on my path to being a special education teacher, I didn't work in education prior. I actually worked in television news as a news producer for local television stations. And I worked in a little bit of university PR for a while and just didn't do anything remotely close to the behavior special education field. During the first recession, I ended up leaving the field to take care of my children. Then my husband joined the military and I stayed home with my kids because honestly, childcare was way too much for me to go to work, and I don't regret it because it was the best decision of my life. Those years that I had home with my kids, even though we struggled financially, were the biggest blessing for me because I got to build bonds with my children and memories that I will cherish for the rest of my life. But as my kids got older and a little bit more independent, and I felt like I could go out and work a little bit, I went ahead and started going out and substitute teaching and working in a preschool where my kids were at. And between subbing and doing preschool here and there, I started to realize that I really loved working in education. I also discovered that I really was good with the kids that a lot of people struggled with, that they had a lot more challenges with. The kids that would tended to have meltdowns and the kids that weren't as verbal, it just seemed like I gravitated towards them and I was able to work really well with them. So that was kind of my first step in. As I was substitute teaching, I picked up a job for a special education classroom as an assistant. Went in there. Now, this was not a behavior classroom. This was a classroom for students with intellectual disabilities, but I went in there and absolutely fell in love with the students that were in the room. I was asked to come in and work as assistant permanently in that classroom. So when I started in that classroom, we didn't have any students with any big behavioral needs at that point. It was still pretty simple other than the basic things that they needed. But over time, we did start to get students that had more behavioral needs. And that was the first time that I actually worked alongside a behavior analyst and learned about behavior data collection. And I learned about ABC, antecedent, behavior, consequence, all of that stuff. It was my first step into that. And I found it very fascinating. Figuring out why the students were doing what they were doing and kind of learning how I could help them, how I understood that behavior wasn't a way to just like get under your skin, that behavior was communication. It was trying to get help for an unmet need in some way. And I found that really fascinating that I could help those students. And when we would implement those strategies and seeing those students be successful, a lot of times it was through trial and error, and I would be very much lying if I wouldn't say that sometimes it was extremely stressful because a lot of our students were nonverbal. So it was a lot harder. You really had to watch for the cues and the tells as to why they were struggling behaviorally. So I ended up PCSing. If you're not familiar with that, that is a military move. And I no longer worked in that classroom and I moved to Virginia. And I was still an assistant, but at that point I had decided to go back to school to get my master's degree. And while I was working on my master's degree in special education, I took a job at a special education consortium where they worked with students with challenging behaviors. And I took a job there and really dived into behavior and what we needed to do to support students with behavioral needs and autism. And I learned a lot from this program. Although it was one of the toughest jobs I've ever had in my entire life, I learned so much about behavior and working with students that have behavioral needs that it really just enhanced my learning alongside going to graduate school at the same time and kind of putting all the pieces together. It just enhanced my love for what I was doing. I ended up taking a teaching job, and my teaching job was not with that program. I ended up taking a teaching job starting off with junior high age students and kind of a cross-category program, but it was the second year I wasn't able to do it because they had some licensing requirements. So I had to go for another position in the district, and there was an availability for preschool. I was excited because I still had little children at the time. They were in elementary school, like kindergarten, first grade, but preschool wasn't far off from what I was used to. I had also worked in an elementary setting when I worked with the students with intellectual disabilities, and I had also worked in just a preschool setting for students that hadn't been identified with any special education needs, even though there were plenty that definitely were showing the signs of having some needs. But I was excited to work with preschool because I do really enjoy little children. I love children of all ages, to be honest, but I was excited to kind of be near what I knew was familiar and working with younger kids. So I had taken the job working with the preschoolers, and preschoolers, especially in a special education preschool program. They call it early childhood special education, where I was at. A lot of them are nonverbal. That is a big part. I had students with a whole range of disabilities. I had students who were in wheelchairs and non-ambulatory. I had students who were nonverbal, who were there for language, and I had students who were there for behavioral needs. So it was a very eventful classroom. I learned a lot about teaching language and how children, especially young children, use some not so great behaviors to try to get across what they need and to meet those unmet needs. I learned a lot about AAC and communication and core words and all of those things. So once again, just really enhanced my love of that kind of field. And I just dove deeper and deeper into understanding behavior. And when we moved out of there and I was no longer doing preschool and we moved to another duty station, I went into elementary, wasn't really looking to go into behavior, was just doing an inclusion teacher role, but they needed someone to fit the bill. And I ended up working with behavior students at that school as well. So I kind of feel like it was following me. It was what I was meant to do. And I just kept going and learning as I was doing it. And just, it really became my niche. It became something that I loved. On top of it, during that time, my own child was starting to struggle in school and need behavioral supports. And I saw how much it hurt to be on that end as a parent. It was one of the hardest moments of my life. I think it's given me a lot of empathy towards the parents that I work with. A lot of times people jump on the parents of these students and they judge them. And it's unfair because not all these behaviors are reflections of their parenting. And some of these behaviors, I'd say a lot of these behaviors are a reflection of the child's disability and their unmet needs and their inability to cope and handle certain things. And in the case of my child, the ability to be able to emotionally regulate. My child is extremely bright, but didn't really have the emotional regulation piece to match how incredibly bright my child was. So this led to a lot of screaming, crying outbursts and eloping, which in the special education world means leaving from the classroom to kind of get away from whatever was causing fight or flight. And we had a very long journey with that. I don't want to go into too much detail because I really feel like that's my child's story to tell, but we went through a lot and I learned a lot. But I say the biggest thing that I learned was understanding where these children are coming from, because my child would articulate to me how they felt during this time about certain things. And also understanding how sometimes we are perceived as parents and how the schools can sometimes treat parents as if they are the problem. And it's kind of led me into my passion that schools and parents need to work together, because when schools and parents really collaborate, that's when I have seen the biggest growth with children. I feel like when they want to play the blame game, which happens a lot when a child is having behavioral outbursts at school, the parents tend to want to blame the school because their child may not act like that at home. And I know a lot of teachers roll their eyes to that, but it is 100% the truth. My child doesn't act like that at home. They act like that at school because school is where the stressors are. And it's not because the teachers are doing anything wrong, but the child is put into a situation where they have to really challenge themselves emotionally and mentally. And that when they don't have the skills, and they don't have, they're a little bit delayed in that development, that definitely leads to fight or flight and leads to a lot of the behaviors that we were seeing. And that happens a lot with younger children. And if it's left unmanaged, it can create bigger problems down the road. I've worked in elementary settings, obviously, and now I'm currently in the junior high setting. The junior high setting is a little bit different because, once again, I have to explain to parents a lot that this is not, your child's behavior is not always a reflection of you. Sometimes it's just a reflection of their choices. Now, I know that's not always accurate. Sometimes we do get some parents who do make a lot of excuses for their children. I think their hearts are in the right place. But once again, that leads back to the whole working as a team and making sure that you are collaborating as a team for the best interest of the child. And sometimes that means making tough decisions and saying no and holding firm to expectations. And I think that's hard for a lot of parents to do, especially parents who are working a lot or maybe don't have the skills to emotionally regulate themselves. So it's hard for them to regulate themselves enough to follow through with the things that need to be done for their child. But that's just that as a complete background. So my background, my story, obviously was pretty extensive. I'm probably gonna have to edit some of that down so you aren't bored out of your minds. But my advice, what I want to get into now, if you are thinking about working in this field, what to expect. And this is if you're thinking about working in this field as a teacher or as a special education assistant, paraeducator, whatever your county district calls them. I think the biggest thing is to make sure you do research up on these disabilities. You really need to be well versed. Also understanding that working with these children you're not going to work with them like you would be parenting them. You're not their parent, you are their teacher. And you don't want to fall into that trap. They've got parents. And you need to be that adult model that helps them, but also understand that you're only going to be with them a short period of time. Like, building those relationships are important. Obviously, they need to trust you, but the biggest mistake I see is some teachers and some support staff, they want to parent these kids, and that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be teaching them and helping them. And sometimes if you get to that point where you're looking at them from that lens, you can be a little bit biased. So making sure that you still set a professional boundary while also showing compassion can be a little bit hard, but it's extremely important. The next thing that I think is really important as well is understanding how behavior works. You don't know, there are plenty of YouTube videos on my channel that can get you started researching, and there's free RBT courses that can really help you understand how behavior works. And you can check those out online. You can watch, like I said, a ton of YouTube videos, a ton of TikToks. There are so many online resources that can help you just to get you started. And also, don't be afraid to ask questions. I think it's very important to ask the people around you and learn from those seasoned professionals. But another thing I think to understand is that sometimes behavior is not personal. It's not personal. It may feel personal because sometimes you get the personal attack, but you have to understand where it's coming from. A lot of times the outbursts, the things they say, the things they do are a response to a stressor, and they're not necessarily you. And sometimes you end up being the brunt of it because you're the person maybe asking them to do the things that are stressful and pushing them out of their comfort zone. Understand baby steps. You know, if you have a child who doesn't have a very strong stress, doesn't have it built up their resilience, you're going to have to take things very slowly and recognize when they're ready to move forward and to help them, guide them out of their comfort zone. But we don't want to be too pushy. You got to follow the lead of the child. Behavior change takes time, and it can be a very frustrating position for a lot of new professionals, teachers, paraprofessionals, because you don't see results super fast, especially at the secondary level. A lot of kids at this point are really set in their ways. So it can be very frustrating, and you will see a lot of burnout from people working in this area because you don't see, we're results driven. That's what we want to see as teachers, and sometimes you don't see it, and it can take years, and sometimes you'll never see it, and you'll find out about it down the road when you hear from the kid as they grow up and what they've been able to accomplish, and they come back and thank you. And you have to be okay with that, to live with that. And that can be very challenging for a lot of people. You have to have a thick skin, and you just can't let things hurt your feelings that badly. At the end of the day, it is just a job. And I think that's what goes back to keeping that professional boundary and understanding that you are not this kid's parents. You are not acting as some sort of savior. You're just a professional along the way trying to help them the best that you can. And sometimes you're successful and sometimes you're not. And the best thing to do is just continue to come in every day and try to do your best job and just move forward. I think another really important thing to understand if you're getting to this field is data is everything. Because like I said, you don't see things. Your results are very delayed, but data shows you your results. And if you're tracking data effectively and you're graphing it, which if you need help with that, I have a lot of videos on that too. But if you're tracking data effectively, that is where you're going to see the growth, because sometimes we don't see it day in and day out. And sometimes we can get really frustrated. It's also really important to understand that sometimes behavior gets worse before it gets better. And, when you can see it, I personally like to see things in numbers, because numbers are not subjective. They're just what they are. And if a kid was hitting 5 times a day and now it's down to 2 times, that's growth. that's huge. If they were cussing you out, we had 105 instances of cussing at you, and now we're down to 50, that's huge. And you may not see that unless you can look at the numbers. So understanding data collection and the value that it plays in behavior, I think is a really important thing to understand if you're going to work in this field. I also think it's very important to understand that from time to time, you will probably get hit, spit on, kicked, bit, scratched. It happens. You will definitely get cursed at. And you need to be prepared. And when I say you need to be prepared, you need to come in dressed appropriately for the job. Sometimes I might wear jewelry like this because I don't have students who are super aggressive. I'm lucky this year because I don't have that, but I have had super aggressive students in the past. And those are the days when you wear tennis shoes, jeans, and a t-shirt and probably no jewelry. But right now I don't have students that have any of those needs. And you don't see that so much in secondary, I'll be honest. It's more of an elementary thing, but expect that it is part of the job, and your school district, if they're supportive, should provide things like armed guards and that sort of stuff, because those things do happen. You need prepared. You don't want to get hurt. It is a part of the job, and if that is something that you can't deal with, there are other fields that you can work in. Now, I don't think that people who sign up to be gen ed teachers expect for this sort of thing to happen, but when you work in behavior special education, you will see these things happen, and you need to be prepared and dress appropriately. Showing up in high heels when you know you have a runner, I mean, come on, you know. And you have to learn to really rely on your teammates and support each other, because it's a really stressful job. And sometimes people, because they can't really respond to the students because they have disabilities and you have to be patient, they turn those feelings on each other. And you have to recognize that it's not about the other person. Sometimes it's just the stress from the job. And if you're worried about how to manage that stress, I have some other videos, of course, where I talk about that, but I think the biggest thing is making sure that you do take time for yourself, that you do communicate to your staff members when sometimes enough is enough and you need a break from it. You do take your days when you need your days, and recognize that this field is challenging and what you're doing is challenging. So hopefully this was helpful for you. It gave you some insight into what I do, why I do it, and if you're interested, what you would be getting into. Of course, if you are interested in any of the jewelry from Ana Luisa that I told you about, make sure to use my link below, get your 30% off, which is very helpful if you're trying to buy things for Christmas. Thank you so much for coming to my channel, and I will catch you in the next one.